Good morning. I want to start off with a story that I read that I feel is a very good segue to today's Torah portion, where we're going to go a little bit back. We're going to go to Yisro of last week, and then we're going to move into Mishpatim, Torah portion, Mishpatim for this week. So there was a very, very wealthy businessman, an observant, Torah observant Jew, and when he passed away, he left two wills. One will, he said to his children, will be open right when I pass away. And the second will, please open after the Shloshim, which means the 30 days. It's called the Shloshim. So they open up the first will, and he says the instructions how to bury him. Of course, the ritual burial society, Chevra Kadisha. But I want to be buried with my very special socks. And he gives them the location of the socks, and they go and they find it. It's wrapped beautifully in tissue paper, and they bring it to the Chevra Kadisha, the burial society. And the burial society says, we're sorry. It's against Jewish law and tradition to bury anyone in socks. We have the shrouds, and that's it. But if you can find a rabbi that gives you permission, we'll do it. So they went from rabbi to rabbi, and they said, listen, our father was a religious Jew. He was also a scholar of the Torah. If he said he wants to be buried in his socks, surely he knew what he was doing. But they could not find a rabbi to give them a leniency. Every rabbi said, listen, it's not part of the Torah or tradition to bury anybody in socks. So what could they do? They couldn't follow their father's will, so they did the best. They said, okay, we'll bury him as it's meant to be. Comes 30 days later, and now they're reading the second will. And the father starts off by saying, children, my dear beloved children, by now you know that I was not buried in my socks, that it's against Jewish law and tradition for a person after they pass on to be buried in their socks. But the reason I asked you is to let you know that as much money as you're going to inherit now from me, you know one thing, you cannot leave this world with anything, not even with your socks. Remember that, he tells them. So this is a very, I think, a nice insight. This is a true story to the Torah portion last week of Yisro, when Almighty God has the Jewish people by Sinai, and the 10 commandments, we call them the 10 commandments, but really in Hebrew, Aseres Hadibros say the 10 utterances, not the 10 commandments or the 10 suggestions, as some people like to say. Why is it called the 10 utterances and not the 10 commandments? Because the 10 utterances are only a highlight of the 613 mitzvahs given at Sinai. Now, even during the time of the Beis HaMikdash, during prayer, they would read out the 10 commandments, the 10 utterances. Why was it stopped? Because people began to believe that you don't need the 613 mitzvahs. If you have the 10 utterances, that's enough. You don't need to go further. So the sages and the scholars realized that there were people that forgot that this was just a highlight. So as the Jews dispersed among the nations and went into exile, they abolished the custom of reading the 10 commandments as part of the prayers. So it's really the 10 utterances of God, not the 10 commandments. The set of Maimaris, the 10 utterances. Just like the God created the world with 10 sefirot, 10 emanations of God, the 10 commandments correlate to those 10 Kabbalistic emanations. We're not going to go into that today. So now the Torah portion, the Jews got the Torah. And it's very interesting that when we study Torah, we know that there's two parts of the Torah. Who knows the two parts? Given at Sinai. We have what we call the written tradition, the 5 books of the Torah scroll that we take out every Monday, Thursday, Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, we read. That's the 5 books of the Torah called the written tradition. It was given as a scroll at Matan Torah. And then you have the oral tradition, which was later written down, so it shouldn't be forgotten, that what were all the Jews doing in the desert for the 40 years that they traveled? They were learning the oral tradition. Because the written tradition, the 5 books of the Torah, are like cliff notes. They're very vague, as we'll soon see. So the oral tradition is the real book, so to speak. Most people look at it backwards. Most people say what? First, you have the written tradition given at Sinai, and the oral tradition explains the written tradition. No. When Moshe sat and lectured and taught Torah, he taught the oral tradition. Now, you know, when you're a student in a class, whether it's college or high school, and you take notes, you can't afford to write every detail of the note of what the teacher says. You highlight, you take notes, you have cliff notes. You shorten what the teacher says, right? You can't write every word, every adjective the teacher says. You don't even have time. So the written Torah is really the cliff notes. The oral tradition is the real wholesome Torah that we learn, study, and follow. So when you read the written tradition, that's why you need the oral tradition. Because how could you understand so many mitzvahs? As we'll soon discuss, an eye for an eye. A foot for a foot. You knock out somebody's eye. Do I knock out, does the Torah, do the judges of the rabbinical court knock out your eye? Is that what it means? As we'll soon see. So it's very important to know that the oral tradition given at Sinai, the written tradition is the cliff notes, so to speak, of the oral tradition. And everyone always looks at it backwards. We have the written tradition. What do we need the oral tradition? Because the oral tradition is the whole Torah. Whereas in these 5 books, can you really have the whole Torah in these 5 books in one Torah scroll? When there's so much explanation, so much that needs to be understood. So now I'm going to ask you a question. Why did God separate it? Why not write it all down? Okay, it might be 1,001 books, but so what? As we see later, it was written down. In the back of my siddur, it gives you the transmission. If we have time, we'll go over it. Later on, when the Jews could no longer transmit the oral tradition verbally, they started to write it down. That's why you have the big books of the Talmud and the Mishnah and all the Code of Jewish Law, the Shulchan Aruch, and then all the commentaries, right? Why not just give it all at once? There's so many explanations. But one of the most ones that I think resonates with me, that God did not want a people that you spoon-fed information to them. Do it because mommy said. Do it because Tati said. That's good for a child. But as we get older, the beauty and strength of Torah, that it withstands debate, discussion, contradiction. God wanted human endeavor in study of Torah. Not, I say it and do it, which is faith, which is what we do with mitzvahs. But God didn't want robots. God didn't want angels. God wanted people that make mistakes, debate, argue. And at the end of the day, we do have the final ruling how to do a mitzvah. That yes, Shabbos candles are lit 18 minutes before sunset. They're not lit on Thursday because it's more convenient. They're not lit on Monday because that's when I can do it. Shabbos is celebrated on the 7th day of the week, not on any other day of the week. So at the end of the day, we do have a final ruling, but God wanted the human endeavor, the human analysis. And that's what we see even today. New science comes out with fertility. Are you allowed to do it this way? Are you allowed to do it that way? All the new scientific inventions that sometimes require halachic insight. Are you allowed to pull the plug? When a person is brain dead, but their heart is beating, when they're being kept alive, all these laws in the Torah even relate to today's scientific technology and scientific advancements. That's how powerful Torah is. Okay, a little introduction to how we glean our information from Torah and mitzvahs. So interesting happens in Yisro, very interesting conversation happens. Jethro, who knows who Jethro is? Yisro is the father-in-law of Moses. And he was the high priest of so many nations, one of the richest men living in the desert there. And his oldest daughter marries Moshe, and she takes on the way of the Jewish life, of the Israelites, the Hebrews. And then he converts. And the big bang of him converting was the fact that he was a priest of so many faiths and religions, and yet he realized Judaism, Torah, mitzvahs are the ultimate religion that he wants to follow. He comes to his son-in-law. He says to Moshe, listen, how could one man be the judge, the conflict resolver, the therapist for millions of Jews? You're going to burn out. You're going to burn out. You don't even have enough hours in the day to answer 25,000 emails, 50,000 phone calls a day. You and your secretary can't handle it. You need to appoint a hierarchy of judges and prophets who can work with you and under you. And ultimately, if we need a Supreme Court justice, we come to you. And immediately Moses asks God, and God says yes, and Moses says good. And they appoint the 70 elders who become prophets. Okay, so now Moshe has a whole group of saints and prophets and sages and scholars who are helping him with mediating, resolving conflict, teaching Torah, prophesizing, and so on and so forth. Now, I have to ask a question. Moshe didn't know he needs help? You're the CEO of Microsoft. Do you design your own graphic design? Do you answer your own phone calls and emails? Do you type your own correspondence? Do you do your own financial books? You hire a chief financial officer, you hire secretaries, administrators, salespeople, graphic designs, techies, IT, human resources. Why didn't Moshe do it himself? He needed Yisro, his father-in-law, to come and tell him? Why didn't Moshe right away say, you know what, this is a very difficult task. We need a hierarchy. We need state courts. We need civil courts. We need rabbinical courts in this part of the encampment and in this part of the encampment. How come Moshe didn't be the one to say, yes, I'm going to do this, set up these courts of law to help me out? What are your thoughts on this? Why did he need his father-in-law to come advise him, so to speak? And you know, he could have said to his father-in-law, who are you? Johnny come lately. You weren't even in Egypt with us. You're telling me what to do? Like a mother-in-law tells her son-in-law. Why aren't you helping my daughter more? Why aren't you taking the kids out to the park? So what are your thoughts on this? Why wasn't Moshe the one to come say, you know what? It's getting difficult here. I can't answer all the emails. I need help. What are your thoughts on this? Please share if you'd like to. Not, you don't have to. So Moshe did come up with this idea. He knew that he needed help. But first, Moshe was trying to establish a precedence. What precedence? That every Jew can come to Moshe. That every man, woman, and child is accessible to the Moshe, to the leader, to the Rebbe, to the scholar of the generation. That no one has to think, I'm not deserving of speaking to Moshe. I can't get close to Moshe. Moshe wanted to set a precedence that his job of all else is to be a shepherd to his people. You need me, I'm there for you. You want to chat with me about what's going on in your life? I'm there for you. And once he set that precedence that he's accessible at all times, then he agreed, as Yisro told him, to set up a hierarchy of prophets, sages and saints who could help him mediate and again deal with problems, issues, conflicts, controversy, counseling among the millions of Jewish people who needed help at any given time. But he wanted to set a precedence. And now I'm reminded that the Lubavitcher Rebbe every Sunday would stand and give out dollars for hours and hours. Couldn't the Rebbe give the dollars to the assistants and say, you know what, whoever wants $1 from me, here, I touched the pile, you stand, take shifts and give out the dollars. But the Rebbe stood handed everyone, men, women, children, all faith communities, politicians, leaders, shepherds, custodians, blue-collar workers, white-collar workers. I just saw a video of the Rebbe giving out dollars, and a Black American woman, an older woman, passes him by and says, Rebbe, thank you, Rabbi Schneerson. You know, I worked for your wife, Rebbetzin Chayamushka, as her housekeeper for years. And she was a great woman, Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson. Mrs. Schneerson was amazing. And the Rebbe handed her $1 and said, thank you very much. The Rebbetzins housekeeper came to get $1 from the Rebbe. It was such an interesting video. So Moshe wanted to set a precedence that, as God said, you're all holy. The rabbi's not the only holy one. The Kohen is not the only holy one. Every single Jewish person is holy. Every single Jewish person can come to Moshe and pour out their heart or ask a question. So Moshe wanted, of all else, people to know that a Rebbe, a rabbi, a leader, a Jewish leader is always there for you. And then we also have, of course, the courts of law to set up the hierarchy. And then there's another very interesting insight here, and I'll explain it through a story. There was a very poor man and son who lived on a farm. They had no money, they were penniless. And winter came and they only had one coat. So they fought. The son said, I need the coat. I work outside with the sheep and the goats and the horses and the fields. I freeze. I can't do my job if I don't have some coat to wear. The father says, I'm elderly. We don't have money for wood to build a fire. I freeze. My bones are brittle. I could die of pneumonia. I need the coat. And this conflict and fighting went on every single day. They said, that's it. We're going to the rabbi. They got on their wagon. They drove into town. The rabbi said, what is it? And each one pleaded their case. The rabbi said, let me think about it. Comes back a few minutes later. He says to the father, I am ruling in favor of your son. Your son is supporting you. Your son is outside. He's in much greater danger of freezing to death than you are. So the father reluctantly took off the coat, gave it to the son. And they went home. The son in the morning gets up to put on the coat, and he sees his father blue in the face. The fingers are blue, the feet are blue. He's saying, I'm going to go take the coat now. My father's going to freeze. So he gives his father the coat. Father puts it on. The father looks out at the window. He sees his son working. His son is shivering. His son can't even hold the pitchfork to feed the cows and the horses. He runs out. He gives his son the coat. And every day they fight. You need the coat. Now you need the coat. You need the coat, Dad. You're going to freeze. No, son, you can't be without the coat. Again, constant fighting over the coat. So they go back to the rabbi. And he says, what's the problem now? The father says, my son really needs the coat, but he refuses to wear it. He keeps giving it back to me. And the son says, because my father is suffering. How could a son let his father suffer? The rabbi strokes his beard. He says, 1 minute. He goes into the back room and he comes out with a beautiful, thick, warm coat. He says, here, now you have 2 coats. No one has to fight. They're overjoyed. Wow, there's 2 coats. So the father says, Rabbi, I don't understand. When we came to you a few weeks ago, why didn't you pull out the coat and give it to us then? So the rabbi said, I'll tell you why. When you were fighting that you want the coat, and your son was fighting he wants the coat, and each one of you portrayed a kind of self-absorbed, selfish attitude, it brought out in me also reluctance to share. I forgot all about my extra coat, actually. It was in the back of my mind, but I didn't even think of it. All I thought about is how each one needs fighting for the coat. But now when each one of you portrayed a feeling of giving, my father needs the coat, no, my son needs the coat, and you showed compassion and a little self-sacrifice, then in me it brought out, hey, what about, yeah, I have a coat to share. So what is this story telling us? That a leader, a rebbe, a rabbi, their atmosphere is sometimes created by the people they serve. They said when you came into the presence of Moshe, you couldn't bicker. When you saw Moshe, you couldn't bicker. It brought out in you a selflessness. So that's why Moshe didn't want his people, he wanted to reflect his energy to his people. Because energy is drawn from one another. Again, when you were in the presence of Moshe, it brought out something amazing. The Geula Cohen of the Israeli Knesset writes that she met every leader in the world during her time in the Knesset. But there's only one person she met that when you went into his room and you left his room, you were never the same, the Rebbe, she said. Whenever I went into the Rebbe's room, I never came and left the same person. I was always a better version of me. And that's why when Moshe discusses it with Yisro, what does he say? Why do I need help? Ki lahem davar ba'elai. When they need help with something, he comes to me. So the commentaries say, what does that mean? When they need help, he comes to me? Why doesn't it say when they need help, they come to me? Because when two people had an argument or a controversy or debate or dispute, they were so impacted by Moshe's kindness, goodness, strength, and brilliance and understanding that both parties didn't even have to come before Moshe. It wasn't like a regular court of law where Joe and James come and everyone pleads the case and the judge says, yeah, this is the ruling. When Moshe's greatness was that they didn't even need to send both parties. One would come, tell Moshe the problem, and Moshe would tell them what to do. That was what Moshe wanted to give his people before he sets up courts of law. That even when they have a dispute, only one comes to me. You don't need both to come to me, in a sense. Because you know why? Because the people were not interested in what's better for me. They were interested in truth. Which one of us is right? Which one of us should wear the coat? Not I deserve the coat, I deserve the money. It was my business first. I thought of the idea. It's a copyright infringement. My wife never listens to me. When people came to Moshe, it was always about what is the right thing to do. And when you're not selfish and self-absorbed, and you only want to know what's the right thing to do, you don't need to bring your lawyer. You don't need to have both parties. Miriam says to Sarah, I'm going to go to Moshe and discuss it with him, and I'll tell you what Moshe said. And she said, fine, I trust you'll do the right thing. That was the greatness of the relationship with Moshe. He brought out that they didn't even care about the end result. It was more about what's the right thing to do. That's what a leader is. And that's why initially Moshe did not set up the courts of law. He wanted to create a trend of people wanting just to do the right thing, not because I'm right. It's always about ego when there's an argument in court. It's never about who's right. They say now in court, who wins? The better lawyer. Doesn't matter if you're right or wrong in court anymore. It's not about justice. It's about who can argue the case better and win. Whether you're right, wrong, deserve the money or don't deserve the money, deserve the ruling or don't deserve the ruling. This is what it was with Moshe. How do you know that this wasn't an ego thing? I'll tell you how you know, and then we'll move on. Remember when Moshe now says, okay, there's going to be 70 prophets and 70 sages to help me, and God quickly gives them all the power of prophecy, because what Moshe appointed, God says, that's right. And then there were 2 junior prophets, Eldad and Medad, who also got prophecy. So remember in the earlier Torah portions we discussed it, Eldad and Medad see Joshua, who's going to be the next leader. Remember Joshua, Yoshua? And they say to Joshua, Moses is dying and you're going to take over. So Joshua runs to Moshe and says, kill those 2 young prophets. They're blasphemizing. They're predicting you're going to die and I'm taking over. Moshe, we cannot tolerate this how do you call when you go against the king? This revolution or revolt.
Insurrection.
Insurrection. Very good. So Moshe says to Joshua, what? Do you think I care that they're prophesizing? I want every Jew to be a prophet, Moshe says. You think I want to be the only prophet in the world? So Moshe's humility, we can never accuse him of wanting to be a god or a cult leader. Everyone has to come to me. I'm the one. Moshe so wanted to delegate, so was happy to delegate, but it was more of setting a precedence of what a leader needs to do for their people and return what a people needs to do for their leader. So here, just from the story alone tells you Moshe didn't care. Moshe didn't care whether he was the leader. Moshe only cared the end result. How do I teach people to know that it's all about what's right, never about what's better for me, what I need, what I want. It's all about what's right for the family, the relationship, the marriage, the children, the community, the world. That's what this teaches us. This is what it's all about. So does anybody want to say anything?
Interesting. I never thought of Moshe this way. I never really heard this before.
Yeah, Moshe was something else. And Moshe was such a quintessential leader. Like if you want to know leadership,
Right.
the book.
So actually, like it's like all the politicians these days are not like Moshe. You know, it's mostly like,
no kidding.
You know, the religious leaders who are like that. You know.
Yeah.
And I heard that story about the socks before.
Yeah, you did. Rabbi
Yes.
Britt that story.
It was about Newberger, right?
I don't remember who it was. But
I think your brother actually told the story.
Oh, my brother also told the story. Good.
It's a great one. Yeah.
So, we just celebrated Valentine's Day. Even though Jews, it's Saint Valentine's, we don't exactly, but along those lines, we always say, I love you. I think I said this last time too. But the truth is, what should you really say when you want to tell someone you love them? Someone you truly love. Jane, do you remember?
You I love?
You I love. Why? Because I love you means I. It's about I. I love, it's about me. Love you. But if you truly love someone, you have to put them first. You're the priority. You I love. You I love. So when you tell someone you love them, you have to say, darling, you I love. Not I love you. You're putting yourself in the sense first.
I like that. I just heard that in like Torah form, where it's not about I, it's about you, or like it was written a certain way. I like that. You I love.
So, most people think to yourself, you give to whom you love, right? You give to whom you love. But the truth is,
Not always.
you love those to whom you give. In other words, when you want to have real love, it's about giving. Because most of the time we're looking, what am I getting out of this relationship? What am I getting out of this? What's in it for me? But when you give, and now a part of you is in the person you gave to, whether it's a child, a spouse, parents, friends, so you love to whom you give. Because you know why? A part of you is now in them. So love is about being a giver. People always think love is about what can I receive? I don't feel the love. I don't feel it. But if you give, that's true love. Because love is to whom you give is who you love. Not you give because you love the person. You love because you give. You don't give because you love. So that's my little tidbit on love for this very heartfelt week. When everyone's sending out chocolates and hearts and posting beautiful pictures of those they love. So now we're going to segue into the Torah portion Mishpatim, which means laws. There's 3 types of laws in the Torah. Does anybody know the 3 types? So there's Mishpatim, which
what you can't do and what you can do.
Right, so there's 2 categories. Laisa say nase. Don't light a fire on Shabbos. Do put on tefillin every day, or do say prayers every day. So it's the positive commands and negative. That's 2 categories. But within the positive and the negative, there's 3 categories of mitzvahs. So this week's Torah portion is Mishpatim, which means laws, civil laws. Don't kill, don't steal, logical laws. Logical laws. Be honest in business, and so on. Laws that maybe you would do even if you were not following the Torah. Then you have the chukim, the decrees, laws God said, do it. May not make sense, but you do it because I said so. So a law like that would be the laws of mikvah and purity, the law of the red heifer, the law of eating kosher. And then the 3rd category of laws is edus, testimony. We eat matzah on Passover to remember the exodus from Egypt. We sit in a sukkah on Sukkot, and we celebrate Sukkot because when we left Egypt, we sat in booths and there was a cloud of glory. So many different mitzvahs we do because it's a testimony to our history and to what God, how God saved us, helped us, and the miracles associated. But God says something very interesting, that even the mitzvahs you understand, like don't kill, don't steal, we all know why we don't kill and steal. A civil, moral, ethical country, people, society don't kill and steal. But God says every mitzvah you do it on the level because God said so, not because I understand it, not because it's logical, not because it's convenient, not because it makes sense. Why? Why should we treat every mitzvah on the level of a chok, a decree? Because we're to come a time, and we've seen it, where society says killing is okay. The Nazis said killing is okay because we're trying to eradicate anybody who's not pure, lily pure white like us. It's okay. There was a society that killed old people, put them on the mountaintop, and once they couldn't support and help out the community or the tribe, they were left on a mountaintop to die. So when society takes what we call the logical mitzvahs and then discards it because, hey, it's not convenient, or now society dictates like this or like that, we always have a Torah founded on the mitzvahs of God, not because I like it, not because it's my cup of tea, not because it's logical, but because God said so. So it kind of protects the universe from the illogical humankind and illogical society that decides at times to adapt laws that go against all the ethics, morals, and mitzvahs of Torah and mitzvahs and God, which is, what is Torah? God's wisdom. It's God's wisdom in a book, so to speak. Yet, this is very, very important. God encourages us to debate, ask, question. Why did you give us the mitzvahs of mikvah and purity? Why did you give us a mitzvah of the red heifer and kosher? God, and Rambam writes, it's a mitzvah in a sense to analyze the mitzvah, to find logic and reason in the mitzvah, because that enhances it to you. It makes it more enjoyable, more doable. So in no way does God discourage questioning of Torah and mitzvahs. But at the end of the day, you're not going to not eat kosher. You're not going to decide not to take the antibiotics because you didn't analyze every chemical in your antibiotics. The doctor said to you, this is going to heal your ear infection. By the time you finish analyzing and learning what I know, ear infection will become worse and worse and worse, and you'll be in terrible, whatever, pain that could even lead to disastrous results. The fact that we do a mitzvah and even debate it, or sometimes not like to do a mitzvah. Some mitzvahs we don't like. They're not enjoyable. They're not convenient. They're not fun. They're hard. They're difficult for us for whatever reason. We feel challenged by it. But we do it because God said so, not because we understand it. But that doesn't mean, again, like the Maimonides writes, we must always pursue understanding and knowledge. And that's why you'll read on the laws of kosher, where scientists have shown that meat takes much longer to digest. So that's why you wait 6 hours before you drink milk. And that the meat and the milk, even though they come from the same cow, so it's so illogical, we don't mix. And they found that sometimes that it's not maybe healthy to mix it. So you see that we do find reasons behind kosher, for example. But you can't tell your child, we don't eat pig because pigs are dirty. We don't eat pig because God said so. Because now we have the Department of Agriculture. We have oversight. It's not like in the olden days. So you cannot use health, cleanliness as a logical reason for doing a mitzvah. Although you could find logic in the mitzvahs, we do it because God said so. Just an overview of mitzvahs. So does anybody want to add anything, say anything? So there was a very well-known Knesset member. His name was Shmuel Tamir. He was during the Prime Minister was Menachem Begin, and the Israeli economy at that time, I don't know if you remember, or some of you were not around maybe, was very, very horrific. People were starving. The state in Eretz Yisrael, Israel, was very, very, very difficult. Hunger was rampant. It was a very difficult economical situation. So Shmuel Tamir decided he's going to visit Rabbi Aryeh Levin in Jerusalem, a very famous, compassionate, well-known scholar, Rebbe, rabbi leader, and ask him if he could make a temporary edict for abortion, where families know that the rabbi said during these very painful, difficult economic times, you can abort a child. You can't support them. What are you going to do? Wow. Like what happened in Egypt. Remember, Miriam's father said, listen, how could we live with our wives? This was not abortion, but how could we stay and have intimacy with our wives and our husbands? Our babies are being thrown into the Nile River. Let's divorce. Till Miriam set him straight. So Rabbi Aryeh Levin says to this guy, Shmuel Tamir, Shmuel, it's interesting, many years ago, a young couple came to me with this very same question. They had a little girl, and the wife was pregnant with her second child, and they came to me, they said, Rabbi, we're destitute. We don't have clothes. We're being thrown out of our housing. We can't even feed ourselves. How could my wife have another baby? We want a heter permission to abort the fetus. So Shmuel Tamir says to Rabbi Levin, what did you tell them? Did you give permission? He says, I told them 3 things. 1, the God that gives life sustains life. So God will not let your child be not sustained. You have to have faith in God. The second thing he told the couple, he tells Shmuel Tamir, there's a mitzvah in the Torah, Pru, be fruitful and multiply. You have a little girl, maybe it's a boy, and if it's a boy, you're going to totally fulfill the mitzvah, because the mitzvah is a girl, a boy, and then when they have children and so on. And the third thing, and the most important thing Rabbi Levine said to the young couple, is that God put a soul into this world. In your womb is a soul already. And when God puts a soul into this world, it has a mission and a purpose. If you, God forbid, take away the soul from this world, that soul's mission and purpose will never be fulfilled. He says, imagine you have a symphony, an orchestra, and you take away one instrument. You say, big deal. No. The symphony depends on every note, every nuance. So you cannot take away a soul once in this world. It already has its mission and purpose. So Shmuel Tamir hears this. He says, oh, I see already. You're not giving me permission to enact this edict. Rabbi Levine says, no, I cannot. So as he's leaving, he turns around. He says, Rabbi Levine, I have to ask you a question now. Did the couple listen to you? He said, yes. They had a baby boy. And did that baby boy fulfill his mission and purpose in this world? And Rabbi Levine looks at Shmuel Tamir and he says, well, you have to answer that question because you are their son. So we go into the Torah portion of the mitzvahs. And of course, one of the mitzvahs is, you may not kill a child, abort a child, and so on. What is the purpose of mitzvahs? What do we need them for? Does God really care about the details? Honestly, the great Almighty God cares what I eat, cares if I switch a light on Shabbos. Does God really care? But you know what? Yes. Torah is all about the details. The relationship with God is all about the details. All the details matter. Every single nuance, every single detail matters. Again, remember the famous story with Amadeus Mozart. He created a magnificent symphony for, I think it was King Frederick, right? Of Portugal. And the king is yawning because it's a very long symphony. So at the end, he says to Mozart, it was magnificent. It was spectacular, but it was too long. And Mozart says, yes, it was long, but Your Majesty, there was not one extra note. So we wonder, what do we need a mitzvah for? What do you need? What does God really care? Really care Shabbat and Pesach if there's a crumb under my sofa? Does God really care if I left a few breadcrumbs in my china closet? Does God care about the details? But it's all about the details because every mitzvah is part of the symphony of life. Every time we add a mitzvah, the soul symphony sings another note, another note, another note, another note. And that also helps the soul fulfill its mission and purpose on earth. All the pieces of the mitzvahs allow the soul and the body to create that symphony. And when all the souls are singing together, that's the symphony of the universe. That creates the perfect, beautiful, musical world, the note. A lot of notes, a lot of mitzvahs, but not one extra. Not one extra. So that's the foundation. Mitzvah means connection. People think it means commandment. Yes, literally it means commandment, but mitzvah means connection. You could be sitting and typing on your computer all day, but guess what? If you didn't plug it in, what did you do? You can stir your pot, but if you never turned on the fire under the pot, what's the point? So we have to make those connections, slowly but surely, and create that symphony in the universe. So we go into the Torah portion of Mishpatim, and it's very, very odd. The first thing is the law of slavery. How does that strike you, by the way? When you open up the book and the first Mishpatim, it's all about slavery. Why do you think that strikes as weird? I think it's very weird because what happened? Go ahead, Jane.
Well, because it hasn't ended.
Slavery hasn't. Good point. But also, what did God tell the Jewish people when they left Egypt? Who remembers? God says to the Jewish people, I am taking you out of slavery, and the only one you're going to serve now as your master is me, Almighty God. You will no longer, ever, ever, ever be enslaved. And as a matter of fact, the civil rights movement, all the movements against to abolish slavery always revert back to the Chumash, to the Bible, and quote Almighty God's words. So this is the prototype for any type of slavery abolishment. Look in the Torah. God said mankind the only one you're subservient to is God. No man, woman, or child, any faith, race, religion may be enslaved by another person. The Torah is vehement against enslavement because remember, we're talking about a different generation. That world, when the Jews left Egypt, only knew slavery. Everything was about slavery. Think of all those movies, Spartacus, Gladiator. Slavery was part of their culture. If you didn't have slaves, you didn't have yichus. Oh, how many slaves do you own? Only 100? What happened? You're falling on bad times? And the abuse of the slaves. If you watch the movie 9 Years a Slave, remember the musician? He gets schlepped and deceived, and they take him and he becomes a slave in a plantation till he meets someone. You remember the story? And he sends a signal. His family didn't know what he disappeared. He disappeared. They put him on a plantation in the South, and they enslaved him. And he finally gets freed. And it's a very, very emotional story. So Torah vehemently objects to slavery. So we know that now. That's established. God said why? The only one you could be a servitude or a slave to, and we're not meaning in a negative way, is Almighty God. And that's not slavery because within the realm of Torah and mitzvahs, we find our greatest freedom and liberation to be who we are truly meant to be. How many times you meet people that say, I did not live up to my potential. I don't feel I have a meaning and purpose in this universe. I still haven't found my meaning and purpose in this world, and I'm already 68. You think there's hope for me? And Rabbi Twersky, Dr. Famous Twersky, writes that the reason many times people want to take their life or are depressed is because they wake up in the morning and they go, why am I here? Why did God put me here? The world would have been better off without me.
Very normal to have those feelings for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because not everyone has a mission. Or sometimes we're mothers and whatever, but we don't know our mission. I mean, we're like living in this world. Actually, I'm talking for myself. I'm figuring out
feel
too
the same
what my
way.
mission. I'm figuring out my mission. I don't know my direction. I have 3 boys. I'm a great mother. That I could say. I do good for Israel and for Jewish causes sometimes, and I have the means. But otherwise, what's my mission?
Right.
I don't have one now. I'm not a Rebbitzin. I'm not, I don't have a direction. And I know someone that took their life last week, which is crazy. And I thought this man had the best life in the world. He was 53, good looking, two girls. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Freida, but it's at 53. And all my friends, we grew up with him in high school. He was my best friend's older brother. And he grew up with everything in life, wealthy, cars, great life, traveled. I'm telling you, to this day, I think of this man, and if you say which person has the best life, you think of him. And he killed himself. And honestly, it took me over the edge, you guys. I mean, I'm better now, but it was so shocking. He has a million friends. Everyone's in disbelief. It's one of the most shocking things that happened to me in my life, that this happened. And so here is a man that gives, has a great job. I know mental illness is very strong, but I'm searching for my mission, Hopefully Hashem will bless me with it, to feel fulfilled but it's interesting. Not everyone has the mission.
Your mission. How do you find your mission?
How do you find your mission?
And your purpose? How do you start from? So I'll tell you my own little advice I give for myself. I'll tell you a story that happened to me this week. So Monday was the Rebbe Chaim Mushka's yard site. And I went to the cemetery to her resting place, and of course to the Rebbe and the Rebbe's mother. But I want to take a step back. That one way of finding your mission and your purpose is baby steps. Baby steps means that, first of all, you start off by waking up in the morning and saying Modani. And I say this, and you might say, oh, you've said it before, but I'll tell you why it's so pivotal. When you say Modani, before you wash your hands, before you brush your teeth, before you check your email messages, what are you saying? Thank you, God, for giving me life, for returning my soul to me. Because remember, the soul takes a little trip during the night. When you sleep, part of your soul goes up, gives accountability. And right away, when you say that one line, Moida'ani lefanecha, melechai v'kayom, shechazarti b'nishnasi b'chem l'rabba monesecha, you're establishing a relationship with your soul. You're acknowledging that you are not just a body in a bed, a body in a designer suit, a body going to work, a body making lunches. You're establishing that you have a soul. And once you know that you have a soul, that's already step one to finding your mission and purpose. Why? Because now you know that life is not about the external things we do. We have to do the external things. But the external things are elevated by the fact that we know that there's a mission and purpose of the soul. How do you find your mission and purpose? So I'll give you a little hint. And you know what? I don't know it all. I'm not the smartest person in the world. Carpe diem. That's one of my mottos in my life. Seize the moment. Whenever an opportunity comes your way, and people look for grandiose adventures. It's not in the grandiose things. It's in the very small things in life. I'm going to share with you a personal story in a second. Nothing great, but personal. Seize every moment. Start looking at every moment as an opportunity to find your mission and purpose. And you know what? Believe it or not, some people's mission and purpose might be to do one little act of kindness for somebody, and that was it. You don't always have to feel your mission and purpose, and I'm not talking about you, but our mission and purpose has to be of the grandiose scale. I'm going to invent the cure for all cancer, or I'm going to be the one to write a book that will solve everyone's problems. Your mission and purpose has to be even a small little thing. It doesn't have to be always the grandiose acts, because all those little things you do that feed your soul's mission and purpose in a small way, the mitzvahs, will eventually grow into a larger component. Every time you add a note, your symphony grows, the musical notes grow. You know what they say? When I'm talking and you're talking, you're interrupting. But when I sing and you chime in, it becomes a chorus. That's what it is. So when I talk and then you start saying your day and you're interrupting me. But when I sing and you sing along, now we have a chorus, we have a choir. We're building our symphony. So I went to the aisle, whatever, with hundreds and thousands of other women. I'm one in a million. You know what I mean? I'm one Chabad woman with 3,500 other women. So who am I? Nobody in a sense, right? So I come and I daven by the Rebbitzin, and then I put my note in, I rip it up. And I had a pile of like 70 notes that I had written to the Rebbe and family members had written to the Rebbe and given to me to put into the OL. So what do? You read your note at the Rebbe's resting place. I hope I'm going to take all of you, by the way, in the next few weeks to the OL with me. We'll go on a little trip. And you read your note quietly, and then you rip it up so no one else can read it, and you throw it in on top of the resting place. It's called the OL, like the tent. So I have this huge pile, and I'm ripping them up one by one, and a lady standing near me, I don't know, she looks like, it could be a lady off the Westport Main Street, not wearing a sheitel, she's not dressed like it, especially like in the Hasidic garb. So she leans over and says, "Can I help you?" So I smile nicely, and I whisper back, "No, it's my mitzvah." Then I said to myself as I'm ripping, 1 minute, the lady asked to help me. How come I said it's my mitzvah? Why can't it be her mitzvah? So I hand her a pan, it's called a pan, and I let her rip it up, and I could see on her face, she was so happy. Okay, carpe diem, seize the moment. I said, maybe it's Elijah the prophet. And I said no to her. Who knows who she is? She could be a prophetess, and I just turned her down. Anyway, I walk out of the aisle, and I meet a cousin, and I meet friends, and the talking doesn't stop. And a lady comes over to me and to my cousin with a bag from the hardware. And she's very agitated. She says to me and my cousin, I just bought myself a knife in the hardware store, and I had it immersed, because it's always a pain to have it immersed in the ocean, But there they have a mikveh, they immerse it, so you could use it right away. But now I realize I can't take it on my flight. They'll confiscate it because I'm only doing carry-on luggage. So if I give it to you, why should I give it to the airline, to the TSA officer? I want to give it to one of you. So my cousin doesn't want to take it. So I say to her, I'll take it, but only if I could pay you. So she says, no. You don't have to pay me. And I'm like, I can't take the knife if you're not letting me pay you. Give me your address. I don't have any cash on me. I'll send you the money by mail. So with back and forth, she didn't want the coat, I didn't want the coat, whatever that story. I take the knife. I know this sounds like a ridiculous story, but listen what happened. I take the knife.
Amazing.
And yesterday I write out a check. I told my husband, mail it, it's LA, mail it for me right away. Because I did tell her I'm paying her for the knife. And I could see she was happy because she thought to herself, if I spent all this money on the knife, I can't even use the knife. So I was very happy to pay her. And I needed another knife like you need another earache, okay? Because I have like 9 knives in my house, but I decided I'll make it parav. I need a parav knife. Okay, anyway, I go back to the car. My husband is waiting. I tell him the story with the knife. He says, what's the bag? I said, I bought a knife. So my husband says to me, Freida, it says in the Torah that Erev Rosh Hashanah, you buy a new knife. There's a custom. Why? Because a symbol of wealth. It's a symbol to bring wealth. So it's a good thing you bought a knife, he tells me.
Oh, he's so
So I say to my husband, Shia is very interesting because when I wrote my note to the Rebbitzin and to the Rebbe, my note asking for blessings, I wrote that I'm struggling with fundraising. I have to raise funds to keep Circle of Friends going. I struggle every day. I can't sleep. I need money. I need to raise funds. I'm struggling. I also struggling with, parnasa, which means, income for the family. And I asked the Rebbe and the Rebbitzin, please, for a blessing to help me in my endeavors. So my husband said, good. We come home. The next morning, I get a letter. There was a very affluent Jewish fellow who came to a Circle of Friends event. His grandson was a volunteer. And after the event, he came over to me, says, you know what, I'm going to pledge to give you a certain amount of money every year for your organization. And it was a very nice sum. And every year I get a check from his foundation. And I open my email from the foundation, which is the time of year that I get the check, and I see that he doubled his contribution this year. And I don't know, a miracle. So I run to my husband, I'm like, you know the knife story? It worked. Already, with his blessings, we got a double of what we normally get from this foundation, which is, thank God, and it helps a lot. Of course, we have to fundraise more, but so I'm not telling you the story because this is not in any way showing anything about my greatness or anything like that. It's more like, you know, when you are open to possibilities, the possibilities come your way. When you leave the room of the Rebbe, when you leave the place, and you are never the same from when you went in and when you go out. You can never be the same. So every day, the possibilities of finding your purpose and mission, again, don't happen in grandiose. Most of us are like, I can't speak for you. I'm a plain girl, a plain gal, nothing great about me. Struggling every day to be a better Jew and to study and do more mitzvahs and be a better parent and a better grandparent and be, better in my characteristics. But that's finding your mission and purpose. Where every time you're open to possibilities, even silly things, because all those things will lead up to why are you here? Maybe because you had to buy the knife from that lady. Why were you there at that moment? Because you needed to help give her a lift. You never know, and never negate the small little things, the acts of kindness that you do, or the acts of goodness, or the Torah study, or the prayer you said, or the dollar you put in the tzedakah box. Never negate saying, it was too small of a gift. It was too small of a contribution. No. It's never too small of a contribution because it's a contribution. It's tzedakah, penny a day. So that's my little version of finding my mission and purpose. Seize opportunities that come your way. Seize opportunities. That's why my mother always has a joke. Everyone always comes to me. I said, you know why, Ma? You're the busiest. The people who are always the busiest because they're always seizing every opportunity. Oh, you need someone to drive her to the doctor? I'll do it. Oh, you need a dinner for this lady who had a baby? My mother, Mama, where are you? I'm bringing dinner. I'm like, Ma, you're 86. But she called me. This is what it means. And lastly, add another mitzvah to your symphony. Add another musical note to your life. Find a mitzvah you love and like. Add it to your little repertoire. And now your little song has a chorus because there's another note and another note and another note. And that's putting it all together. Before you know it, you'll have...
Gorgeous. I love that, Freida. Thank you. I got to jump off, everyone. Thank you. Shabbat shalom. Great seeing you guys. Thank you, Freida. Thank you. I love that. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Shalom.
Shabbat.
So let's that.
Beautiful.
Point.
It's exactly, I struggle with the same thing. So it was great to hear. It was really beautiful, Freida. Thank you so much.